Hello, and welcome back to Drift into Dreams. If you enjoy relaxing sleep stories, please subscribe and join our peaceful community. Now, get comfortable, and let's begin tonight's journey.
The library that opened only at midnight. The clock that never rang twice. Before tonight's story begins, take a slow, gentle breath. Allow your shoulders to relax. Let the noise of the day slowly drift away, like leaves floating down a quiet stream. There is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to finish. Only this peaceful story and the quiet night waiting to carry you into restful sleep. Now, let's begin. Many years ago, in the northern hills of America, there was a small town called Ashwood. It wasn't famous. It wasn't busy. Most travelers passed through without stopping. The streets were lined with old maple trees whose leaves turned brilliant shades of gold every autumn. Small brick houses stood quietly along narrow roads. Every evening, warm lanterns glowed beside front doors, and the entire town seemed to slow its breathing as night arrived. But hidden at the end of a quiet cobblestone street stood a building unlike any other. It was an old library, built from gray stone. Its tall windows reflected the moonlight. Its wooden doors were carved with stars, moons, and tiny owls. No sign hung above the entrance. No opening hours were written anywhere. During the day, the library always remained closed. The curtains never moved. The windows stayed dark. Many people believed the building had been abandoned decades ago. Children often wondered who had once worked there. Older villagers simply smiled and changed the subject. No one seemed eager to explain. But every night, at exactly 12 o'clock, something remarkable happened. Without a sound, the heavy wooden doors slowly opened. Warm golden light spilled onto the empty street. Inside, thousands upon thousands of books rested quietly upon endless wooden shelves. Old clocks ticked softly. Fireplaces glowed with gentle warmth. And somewhere deep inside, someone always waited. His name was Mr. Edwin Hale. He was an elderly librarian with silver hair, kind eyes, and a long brown coat that seemed as old as the library itself. No one knew exactly how old he was. Some believed he had lived there for 50 years. Others whispered it had been much longer. Yet every midnight, he welcomed visitors with the same gentle smile. One cool autumn evening, a young traveler named Oliver Bennett arrived in Ashwood. He carried a worn leather backpack. His shoes were dusty from weeks of walking. His face looked tired, not because the road had been difficult, but because his thoughts had never stopped. For many nights, sleep had refused to find him. He had wandered from town to town, searching for somewhere peaceful, but every place felt hurried. Every city seemed too loud. Every evening ended with another restless night. As midnight approached, Oliver noticed something unusual. The old library at the end of the street began to glow. Warm golden light appeared behind its windows. He stopped walking. The town around him remained perfectly silent. Then, with a slow, gentle creak, the great wooden doors opened by themselves. Oliver stood completely still. He wasn't frightened, only curious. The warm light spilling from inside felt strangely welcoming, almost as though someone had been expecting him. He took one slow step forward, then another. Behind him, Ashwood slept peacefully beneath the stars. Ahead, the mysterious library waited quietly, and without knowing why, Oliver gently crossed the doorway. The heavy doors closed behind him without a sound. Inside, the smell of old books, polished wood, and fresh tea filled the air. Somewhere beyond the endless shelves, a gentle voice spoke. "Welcome. I've been waiting for you." Oliver looked toward the softly glowing hallway, and for the first time in many months, instead of feeling lost, he felt as though he had finally arrived exactly where he was meant to be. The librarian who knew every visitor's name. The library was warmer than Oliver had expected. A gentle fire burned inside a large stone fireplace. Its soft glow danced across polished wooden floors, filling every corner with quiet comfort. The air carried the comforting scent of old paper, cedarwood, and freshly brewed chamomile tea. Oliver slowly looked around. Bookshelves stretched farther than he could see. Each shelf reached almost to the ceiling, filled with books of every size and color. Some were bound in deep green leather. Others wore faded blue or rich burgundy covers. Tiny brass lamps glowed between the shelves, casting pools of warm golden light. Not a single sound disturbed the silence, except the slow ticking of an old grandfather clock. Then gentle footsteps echoed through the library. An elderly man appeared from between the shelves. His silver hair rested neatly beneath a small brown cap. Round spectacles sat comfortably upon his nose. His long coat brushed softly against the wooden floor as he walked. His smile was calm and welcoming. "Good evening, Oliver Bennett." Oliver stopped. His eyes widened slightly. "You know my name?" The old man nodded gently. "I do." Oliver frowned. "But we've never met." The librarian smiled. "Not every meeting begins the day two people first see each other." His voice was quiet, almost like the turning of a page. "My name is Edwin Hale. I'm the keeper of this library." Oliver glanced around once more. "I didn't even know this place existed." Edwin chuckled softly. "Most people don't. The library only appears to those who truly need it." Those words settled gently in Oliver's mind. Need it? He wasn't sure what that meant. Edwin gestured toward a pair of comfortable armchairs beside the fireplace. "Please, you've traveled a long way." Oliver sat down. The chair was soft, as though it had been waiting just for him. Moments later, Edwin returned carrying a small wooden tray. On it rested 2 cups of warm chamomile tea and a plate of freshly baked biscuits. Oliver smiled. "This feels more like a home than a library." Edwin poured the tea. The best libraries always do. For a while, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled gently. Somewhere high above, rain began tapping softly against the tall windows. It sounded peaceful, not lonely. Oliver wrapped both hands around the warm cup. "I've been searching for somewhere quiet." Edwin nodded. "I know. I haven't slept well in months," Oliver admitted. "My mind never seems to stop." The old librarian looked thoughtfully into the fire. "Many people believe sleep begins when we close our eyes." He smiled. "But often, it begins when the heart finally becomes quiet." Oliver listened carefully. He had never thought of it that way. Edwin stood and walked toward one of the endless bookshelves. His fingers gently traced the spines of dozens of books. Finally, he selected a small blue volume. Its cover carried no title, only a tiny silver moon. Returning to Oliver, Edwin placed the book gently into his hands. "This is your first book." Oliver looked confused. "I've never seen it before." "You couldn't have. It wasn't finished until tonight." Slowly, Oliver opened the first page. His heart skipped a beat. Written in beautiful handwriting were the words, "For Oliver Bennett." He looked up in surprise. "This book belongs to you." Edwin smiled warmly. "It always has." The fire continued to glow. The rain whispered softly against the windows, and somewhere deep inside the mysterious library, Oliver realized that this was no ordinary place. It was a place where every story waited patiently for the person who needed it most, the book that remembered childhood. Oliver carefully held the small blue book. Its leather cover felt warm, almost as if someone had just placed it beside the fireplace. The tiny silver moon on the front shimmered softly in the firelight. He looked toward Mr. Edwin Hale. "May I open it?" The old librarian smiled gently. "It has been waiting for you." Oliver slowly turned the first page. The paper was smooth. Its faint scent reminded him of cedar wood after rain. The first sentence read, "Close your eyes, Oliver. Remember the happiest morning you have ever forgotten." Oliver blinked. "Forgotten?" He quietly continued reading. As his eyes moved across the page, something remarkable happened. The words seemed to disappear. Instead, a memory slowly appeared inside his mind. He was 7 years old again. It was early autumn. Golden leaves covered the ground. His grandfather stood beside a peaceful lake, holding a simple wooden fishing rod. The morning air smelled of pine trees and fresh water. Neither of them spoke very much. They didn't need to. Together, they watched tiny ripples move across the quiet lake. Oliver remembered something he hadn't thought about in many years. His grandfather had smiled and whispered, "The world is always speaking. Most people are simply too busy to hear it." The memory felt so real. He could almost hear the birds singing again, almost feel the cool breeze against his face. Then, the memory gently faded. Oliver found himself back inside the library. The fire still glowed, The rain still whispered against the windows. He looked down at the book. Its pages were now completely blank. "What happened?" he asked softly. Edwin smiled. "The book has already given you what you came for." But there were no words left. There didn't need to be. The best stories are remembered by the heart. Oliver remained silent. He hadn't realized how deeply he had missed that peaceful morning with his grandfather. For years, he had chased new memories, without noticing how many beautiful old ones still lived inside him. Edwin stood and quietly placed another log upon the fire. Warm light filled the room once more. "People often come here searching for answers," he said, "but answers rarely bring peace." Oliver looked toward him. "What does?" The old librarian smiled kindly. "Remembering who you were before life became so noisy." Oliver lowered his eyes. Outside, the rain had stopped. Moonlight now shone gently through the tall windows. Its silver light rested upon the endless rows of books. The library seemed even more peaceful than before. Edwin walked toward one of the windows. Every book in this library remembers something precious. A forgotten smile, a quiet afternoon, a simple kindness. Oliver looked around at the thousands of shelves. "So every visitor has their own book?" Edwin nodded. "Every heart carries its own library. We simply help people find the right shelf." Oliver smiled softly. For the first time in many months, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow. He wasn't worrying about the road ahead. He was simply grateful for one forgotten morning beside a quiet lake. And somewhere among the endless shelves, the mysterious library waited patiently, ready to open another story. When the time was right, Oliver carefully placed the little blue book back on the wooden table. The fire continued to glow quietly, filling the library with gentle warmth. Mr. Edwin Hale smiled. "I believe you're ready for the next room." Oliver stood. "The next room?" The old librarian nodded. "This library is made of many rooms. Each one offers a different kind of peace." Together they walked between the endless bookshelves. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath their footsteps. Golden lamps hung from the ceiling, their warm light making every corner feel safe and welcoming. At the end of a quiet hallway stood an old oak door. Above it, carved into the wood, were 4 simple words: "The Room of Gentle Rain." Edwin slowly opened the door. Inside, Oliver stopped in amazement. The room looked like a cozy reading room, with tall windows overlooking a small garden. Outside, rain was falling gently. Tiny drops landed on green leaves and colorful flowers. A narrow stone path wound through the garden, disappearing beneath old maple trees. The sound of the rain was soft, steady, comforting. There was no thunder, no strong wind, only the peaceful rhythm of raindrops. A comfortable armchair sat beside the window, with a warm blanket folded across it. A steaming cup of tea rested on a small wooden table. Oliver smiled. "It feels like this room has been waiting for me." Edwin nodded. "It has." Oliver sat down. He wrapped the blanket around his shoulders and listened. The rain tapped gently against the glass. Some birds continued singing between the showers. The fireplace in the corner crackled quietly. Every sound blended together like a peaceful lullaby. After several minutes, Oliver noticed something unusual. The longer he listened, the quieter his thoughts became. The worries that usually filled his mind slowly drifted away, just like clouds carried by the wind. Edwin looked toward the rainy garden. "Many people are afraid of rainy days." Oliver nodded. "I used to be." The old librarian smiled gently. "But rain never asks the flowers to bloom faster. It simply gives them what they need." Oliver watched tiny drops slide slowly down the window. He had spent so much of his life trying to hurry, trying to solve tomorrow before today had even ended. Perhaps peace wasn't found by moving faster. Perhaps it arrived when a person finally allowed life to unfold at its own gentle pace. A small robin landed on the garden fence. It shook the rain from its feathers before beginning a quiet morning song. Oliver couldn't help smiling. Even the little bird seemed perfectly content. Edwin quietly spoke again. "Every visitor stays in this room for exactly as long as they need. No more, no less." Oliver closed his eyes. He listened to the rain one last time. Its gentle rhythm no longer sounded like weather. It sounded like rest. When he finally opened his eyes again, the rain had stopped. Soft sunlight broke through the clouds, filling the garden with warm golden light. Tiny raindrops sparkled like diamonds upon every leaf. Oliver stood slowly. "I feel lighter." Edwin smiled. "The room has done its work." Together they stepped back into the quiet hallway. Behind them, the room of gentle rain waited patiently, ready to welcome another weary traveler. On another peaceful midnight, the Hall of Forgotten Letters, Oliver and Mr. Edwin Hale continued walking through the quiet library. The hallway seemed endless. Bookshelves stretched into the soft golden light, while small lanterns glowed gently along the walls. The air carried the comforting scent of old paper and cedar wood. After a short walk, Edwin stopped before another wooden door. Unlike the others, this one had no picture carved into it, only 3 simple words. Forgotten Letters Hall. Edwin gently rested his hand upon the handle. "This room," he said softly, "holds words that were never sent." Oliver looked puzzled. "Letters?" The old librarian nodded. "Letters written with love, with gratitude, with forgiveness, but never delivered." The door opened without a sound. Inside, the room felt peaceful. Long wooden shelves held hundreds of small envelopes. Each one rested inside a tiny wooden box. Some boxes were new. Others looked older than the library itself. Warm candlelight filled the room. There were no windows, only a quiet fireplace and the soft ticking of a small clock. Oliver slowly walked between the shelves. Every envelope carried only one name. No addresses, no dates, only names. "Who wrote these?" he whispered. Edwin smiled gently. "People who needed to speak from their hearts." But sometimes the words were enough. They no longer needed to be sent. Oliver stopped before one unopened envelope. Its paper had turned slightly golden with age. He wondered how many years it had rested there. Edwin carefully picked up a different letter. He unfolded it. "I'll read you only a few lines." His gentle voice filled the quiet room. "Dear Father, I wanted to thank you for every sunrise we watched together. I never found the courage to say it while you were here. I hope somehow you already knew." Edwin quietly folded the letter once more. Oliver felt warmth settle inside his heart. The words were simple, yet they carried years of love. "Did the father ever read it?" Oliver asked. Edwin smiled. Perhaps not. But the person who wrote it found peace." Oliver slowly nodded. He understood. Sometimes, speaking from the heart changed the writer more than the listener. Edwin handed Oliver a blank sheet of paper. "You don't have to write, only if you wish." Oliver thought quietly. Then he picked up the fountain pen. After a long moment, he began writing. "Dear Mother, I'm sorry I became so busy that I forgot our quiet evenings together. Thank you for teaching me that kindness is never wasted. I carry your love with me every day. I simply forgot to say it." When he finished, he folded the letter carefully. Edwin pointed toward a small wooden chest. Oliver gently placed the letter inside. He didn't feel sadness, only peace. The fire continued its gentle crackling. The tiny clock quietly marked another passing minute. Edwin smiled warmly. Some letters don't need a mailbox. They only need an honest heart. Oliver looked around the peaceful room one last time. He realized he had been carrying many unspoken words for years. Now, they no longer felt heavy. Together, they quietly left the Hall of Forgotten Letters. As the door closed behind them, the library seemed just a little warmer, and Oliver's heart felt just a little lighter. The room where time walked slowly. Oliver followed Mr. Edwin Hale farther into the library. The hallway curved gently, and the shelves seemed to grow taller with every step. Above them, an old glass ceiling revealed a sky filled with quiet stars. The library felt endless, yet it never felt confusing. It always seemed to know exactly where its visitors needed to go. At the end of another corridor stood a beautiful walnut door. A small brass clock was carved into its center. Beneath it were 4 simple words: "The room where time walked slowly." Edwin smiled. "This room is one of my favorites." He gently opened the door. Oliver stepped inside. The room was unlike any place he had ever seen. There were no bookshelves, no desks, only large windows overlooking a peaceful meadow. Tall grass moved gently in the breeze. Wildflowers swayed beneath the afternoon sun. A small stream flowed quietly through the field. Beside it stood an old wooden swing hanging from the branch of a giant oak tree. Everything moved slowly. Clouds drifted lazily across the sky. Butterflies floated from flower to flower. Even the stream seemed to whisper instead of rushing. In the middle of the room stood a single hourglass. Its fine golden sand fell so gently that it was almost impossible to notice. Oliver walked toward the window. It feels as if time has almost stopped. Edwin nodded. It hasn't stopped. It has simply remembered its natural pace. Oliver smiled. I don't think I've ever lived this slowly. The old librarian looked toward the meadow. When we were children, an afternoon felt endless. We noticed every bird, every flower, every cloud. He paused for a moment. Then we grew older, and somewhere along the way, we began chasing time instead of walking beside it. Oliver watched a butterfly settle on a white daisy. It remained there for several peaceful moments before quietly lifting into the air again. No hurry, no urgency, just gentle movement. Edwin handed Oliver a small pocket watch. Its silver cover was beautifully engraved. Open it. Oliver did. Inside, there were no numbers, no hands, only a tiny mirror. He looked at his own reflection. Confused, he looked toward Edwin. The watch is broken. The old librarian smiled warmly. No, it reminds us that the most important moment is always the one looking back at us. Oliver looked into the mirror again. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about yesterday. He wasn't planning tomorrow. He was simply standing in a quiet room, listening to the breeze, watching the sunlight dance across the meadow. After a long silence, Edwin quietly said, "Most people wish they had more time, but perhaps what they truly need is to notice the time they already have." Oliver slowly closed the pocket watch. Those words settled gently inside his heart. Outside the window, the afternoon light became softer. The long grass continued its peaceful dance with the wind. Nothing had changed. Yet somehow, everything felt different. When they finally turned to leave, Oliver looked back one last time. The hourglass still stood in the center of the room. Its golden sand continued to fall, slowly, patiently, never rushing. And as the door closed behind them, Oliver carried one quiet lesson with him. Time had never been his enemy. He had simply forgotten how beautiful it could be when he stopped trying to outrun it. The Garden of Silent Stars. The library grew quieter as the night deepened. Oliver and Mr. Edwin Hale walked through another long corridor. The lanterns along the walls glowed with a soft golden light. Somewhere in the distance, an old clock gently chimed once. Not loudly, only enough to remind the night that time was still passing. At the end of the hallway stood a tall glass door. Tiny silver stars were carved across its wooden frame. Above it were the words, "The Garden of Silent Stars." Edwin slowly opened the door. A cool evening breeze welcomed them. Oliver stepped outside. He stopped in amazement. Before him stretched a beautiful garden unlike any he had ever imagined. White roses bloomed beside narrow stone paths. Lavender flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Small lanterns hung from old oak trees, casting warm pools of light across the grass. Above everything, the sky shimmered with countless stars. There was no moon, only thousands of tiny lights filling the heavens. In the center of the garden stood a quiet stone fountain. Its water flowed so gently that it sounded like a peaceful whisper. Oliver walked slowly toward it. The air smelled of jasmine and fresh grass after evening dew. Everything felt calm, almost dreamlike. Edwin sat on a wooden bench beneath an ancient oak tree. He looked up at the stars. "When I was a young man," he said softly, "I believed every answer could be found in books." Oliver sat beside him. "And now?" The old librarian smiled. "Now I know. Some answers only arrive when we stop asking questions." They remained silent. A shooting star crossed the sky. Its silver trail disappeared within seconds. Oliver smiled. "I used to make wishes whenever I saw one." Edwin chuckled gently. "And do you still?" Oliver thought for a moment. Then he slowly shook his head. "I think I've already found what I was wishing for." The old librarian looked at him with kind eyes. "I believe you have." A gentle breeze carried the scent of lavender across the garden. Tiny fireflies floated above the flowers like little golden stars. The fountain continued its quiet song. Oliver closed his eyes. For the first time in years, his mind felt completely still. No unfinished plans, no restless thoughts, only the sound of flowing water, the fragrance of flowers, and the endless stars above. After several peaceful minutes, Edwin spoke once more. "Do you know why this garden is called the Garden of Silent Stars?" Oliver shook his head. "Because stars never hurry. They shine. They guide. They ask for nothing in return." Oliver looked up again. The stars seemed brighter now, not because they had changed, but because he was finally taking the time to truly see them. When they rose to leave, Oliver turned back for one last look. The garden remained peaceful. The fountain continued flowing. The lanterns glowed softly among the flowers, and the silent stars watched over everything, just as they always had. As the glass door closed behind them, Oliver carried another quiet lesson in his heart. Sometimes, the brightest light doesn't speak at all. It simply shines, patiently, night after night, until someone finally remembers to look up. The room of gentle music. Oliver and Mr. Edwin Hale returned to the quiet hallway. The library felt even more peaceful now. It was well past midnight, yet the warm lanterns still glowed as though they would never burn out. Oliver noticed something. The deeper they walked into the library, the quieter his heart became. After a few more steps, they stopped before another wooden door. Unlike the others, this one had no words carved into it. Instead, tiny musical notes were engraved across the frame. Edwin smiled softly. "I think you're ready." He gently pushed the door open. A warm melody floated into the hallway. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft enough to feel like a gentle breeze. Oliver stepped inside. The room was beautiful. A grand piano stood beside a tall window overlooking a peaceful lake. An old violin rested on a wooden chair. A small harp leaned against the fireplace. Shelves held dozens of music boxes, each decorated with tiny flowers and stars. No one was playing, yet gentle music filled the room. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. The wind, the fireplace, even the floorboards seemed to hum with quiet harmony. Oliver closed his eyes. The melody wrapped around him like a warm blanket. Every note felt slow, comforting, familiar. "It feels like I've heard this before," he whispered. Edwin nodded. "You have. When you were a child." Oliver looked at him in surprise. "My mother used to hum this melody while making dinner. I haven't thought about it in years." Edwin smiled kindly. Music remembers what the mind forgets. Oliver slowly walked to the piano. He gently touched one of the keys. A single soft note echoed through the room. Instead of fading away, it blended beautifully with the quiet melody already filling the air. For a moment, the entire room seemed to breathe with it. Near the fireplace sat an old music box. Edwin carefully wound its tiny handle. When he released it, a peaceful lullaby began to play. Its delicate sound filled every corner of the room. Oliver smiled. "I think this is the most peaceful place I've ever been." Edwin looked toward the glowing fire. Music doesn't hurry us. It simply reminds us to listen. Oliver sat in a comfortable chair beside the window. Outside, the lake reflected thousands of stars. A gentle breeze created tiny ripples across the water. The melody continued. Slow, gentle, steady, his breathing naturally matched its rhythm. For the first time in many years, he felt as though sleep could arrive without effort, without worry, without endless thoughts. After a long, peaceful silence, Edwin quietly said, "Some people believe silence means the absence of sound." He smiled, "But true silence is the absence of noise inside the heart." Oliver nodded. He finally understood. The room had not taken away his thoughts. It had simply taught them to rest. When they quietly left the room of gentle music, the melody continued behind the closed door, softly, patiently, waiting for another traveler whose heart needed a little peace. Oliver smiled to himself. He realized that some songs never truly end. They simply stay with us, long after the music fades. The fireplace that never went out. Oliver followed Mr. Edwin Hale to the oldest part of the library. The wooden floors creaked softly beneath their footsteps. The bookshelves here were darker with age, their edges smooth from countless years of gentle care. Warm lanterns glowed between the shelves, filling the hallway with a golden light. At the very end stood a heavy oak door. Above it was carved a simple image of a glowing fireplace. Edwin smiled. This room has welcomed travelers for longer than anyone can remember. He slowly opened the door. A wave of gentle warmth greeted them. In the center of the room burned a magnificent stone fireplace. Its flames danced quietly, casting soft light across the walls. The fire wasn't large. It wasn't loud. It simply burned with a calm, steady glow. Around the fireplace were several comfortable rocking chairs. Each had a folded wool blanket resting on it. A small wooden table held a steaming kettle and delicate porcelain cups. The room smelled of cedar wood, cinnamon, and fresh tea. Oliver smiled. "It feels like coming home." Edwin nodded. That is exactly what this room was built for. They each poured a cup of warm tea and sat beside the fire. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The gentle crackling of the logs was enough. Oliver watched tiny sparks rise into the chimney before disappearing. "They never seem to rush," he whispered. Edwin looked into the flames. Fire knows its own rhythm. It burns patiently. It never tries to become tomorrow's fire. Oliver smiled at the thought. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall. Large white flakes drifted silently through the night. The library looked even cozier against the winter sky. Edwin reached beside his chair and picked up a small wooden box. Inside were smooth river stones. Each stone had a single word carefully carved into it. Hope, patience, kindness, gratitude. Oliver gently picked up the stone that read peace. It felt cool in his hand. "What are these for?" he asked. Edwin smiled. "Every traveler chooses one, not to keep forever, but to remember what they wish to carry into tomorrow." Oliver looked at the word again. Peace. It was the very thing he had been searching for. Yet somehow, it no longer felt far away. He quietly placed the stone back into the box. "I don't think I need to carry it." Edwin looked at him with kind eyes. "Why not?" Oliver smiled softly. "Because I think it's already inside me." The old librarian's face brightened. He nodded without saying a word. The fire continued its quiet dance. Outside, the snow fell gently over the sleeping town. The world beyond the library felt distant now. There were no worries here, no deadlines, only warmth, stillness, and the comforting sound of a fire that had never stopped burning. Oliver closed his eyes. He listened to the crackling logs. Each sound seemed to whisper the same gentle message. Rest, breathe, you are safe. When he opened his eyes again, Edwin was smiling. "The fireplace doesn't keep people warm forever," he said softly. "It simply reminds them how to create warmth within themselves." Oliver looked into the glowing flames one last time. He knew he would never forget this room, because sometimes the brightest fire isn't the one that burns in a hearth. It's the quiet hope that continues to glow inside the human heart. Together, they stood and quietly left the room. Behind them, the fireplace continued burning. Steady, gentle, patient, ready to welcome the next weary traveler who needed a place to rest. The book that had no ending. The night had grown very quiet. Only a few lanterns still glowed between the endless bookshelves. Oliver and Mr. Edwin Hale walked slowly through the library. Their footsteps echoed softly across the polished wooden floor. Oliver felt different now. When he had first entered the library, his mind had been filled with restless thoughts. Now, his breathing was slow. His heart felt light. Even the silence seemed to welcome him. Edwin stopped before the tallest bookshelf Oliver had seen all night. It reached almost to the ceiling. Hundreds of old books rested there, each carefully arranged. Without saying a word, Edwin reached for a large book bound in dark blue leather. Unlike the others, it had no title, no decoration, only a plain cover. He placed it gently on a wooden reading table. "This," he said quietly, "is the final book." Oliver looked at it with curiosity. "It looks empty." Edwin smiled. "In a way, it is." Oliver slowly opened the first page. To his surprise, only one sentence was written. "Every life is a story that is still being written." He turned the page. It was blank. The next page. Blank. Another. Blank. He looked at Edwin. "There's nothing here." The old librarian nodded. "Exactly." Oliver frowned slightly. "I don't understand." Edwin walked toward the tall window. Outside, dawn was beginning to paint the horizon with the faintest hint of blue. The other books helped you remember the past. This one reminds you of the future. Oliver gently touched the empty pages. So, it's unfinished? Edwin smiled warmly. No, you are. Those simple words filled the room with quiet meaning. Oliver looked down at the blank pages again. For the first time, they didn't seem empty. They seemed full of possibility. Every kind conversation he had yet to have, every peaceful sunrise he had yet to watch, every quiet walk, every gentle smile, every act of kindness. None of them had been written yet. The story wasn't over. It was only waiting for tomorrow. Edwin handed Oliver a fountain pen. You may write one sentence. Only one. Oliver thought for a long moment. Then, slowly, he wrote, From this day forward, I will choose peace before hurry. He placed the pen down. The ink shimmered for a moment, then quietly disappeared. The page became blank once more. Oliver looked surprised. My words vanished. Edwin nodded. They didn't vanish. They became part of your life, instead of your book. The first rays of sunrise entered the library. Golden light filled the room. The lanterns slowly grew dim. Somewhere in the distance, the old grandfather clock softly chimed. The library's night was coming to an end. Oliver gently closed the blue book. He no longer felt that he needed answers. He didn't need every road to be clear. He simply needed to keep walking, slowly, peacefully, one day at a time. Edwin placed the book back onto the highest shelf. It will be here if you ever return. Oliver smiled. I don't think I'll need to. The old librarian looked at him kindly. I was hoping you would say that. Together, they walked toward the great wooden doors. Outside, the first birds had begun singing. Ashwood was waking to a brand new morning. Oliver took one last look at the endless shelves. Every book remained exactly where it belonged, quietly waiting for another traveler on another midnight. The door that closed with the dawn. The first light of morning slowly spread across the quiet town of Ashwood. Inside the library, the warm glow of the lanterns became softer as gentle sunlight slipped through the tall windows. Oliver stood beside the great wooden doors. For a long moment, he simply looked around. The endless bookshelves, the quiet fireplace, the polished wooden floor, the comforting scent of old books and cedar wood, everything felt peaceful. Everything felt familiar. Mr. Edwin Hale walked toward him with his usual gentle smile. It is almost time. Oliver nodded slowly. I was hoping the night would last a little longer. Edwin looked toward the brightening sky. Every beautiful night must one day welcome the morning. Oliver smiled. I suppose that's true. The old librarian reached into the pocket of his long coat. He removed a small brass bookmark. It was simple, yet beautifully made. A tiny moon was engraved at the top, with a small star beneath it. Edwin placed it in Oliver's hand. A gift. Oliver looked at it with surprise. I can't accept this. You can. It doesn't belong to the library. It belongs to every traveler who remembers what they discovered here. Oliver carefully held the bookmark. It felt warm in his hand. I'll treasure it. Edwin nodded kindly. I know. They walked together toward the entrance. The great wooden doors stood quietly before them. Outside, birds sang among the maple trees. The town was slowly waking. Fresh morning air drifted into the library. Oliver paused before stepping outside. May I ask you one last question? Edwin smiled. Of course. Will this library always be here? The old librarian looked toward the shelves. The library has always been here, and it always will be. Oliver looked puzzled. But what if no one can find it? Edwin's eyes sparkled gently. Those who truly need it always do. Oliver stood quietly for a moment. Then he understood. Perhaps the library wasn't hidden by walls or streets. Perhaps it revealed itself only to hearts ready for peace. He stepped outside. The cool morning breeze welcomed him. The cobblestone street glowed beneath the golden sunlight. Behind him, Edwin remained standing in the doorway. Take care of your story, the old librarian said softly. Oliver smiled. I will. The heavy wooden doors slowly began to close. Without hurry, without noise, just before they met, Oliver caught one final glimpse of the endless bookshelves glowing warmly inside. Then, the doors closed. The light disappeared. The library became still once again. To anyone passing by, it looked like an ordinary old building. Its windows were quiet. Its doors were firmly shut. No sign suggested the wonder that waited inside each midnight. Oliver slipped the little brass bookmark into his journal. He took one slow, peaceful breath. Then he began walking through the quiet streets of Ashwood. The town looked exactly as it had the evening before, but Oliver no longer saw it with tired eyes. Every flower beside the road, every bird resting on a fence, every gentle breeze through the maple leaves, they all seemed like quiet reminders that peace had never been far away. It had simply been waiting for him to notice it, where every story finds its peace. Oliver walked slowly beyond the edge of Ashwood. The morning sun climbed higher into the clear blue sky. Golden light rested gently upon the quiet fields, while a cool breeze carried the scent of pine trees and fresh earth. He did not hurry. For the first time in many years, there was nowhere he felt he needed to rush. His leather backpack rested lightly upon his shoulders. Inside were only a few simple belongings: his journal, the small brass bookmark Mr. Edwin Hale had given him, and a peaceful heart. Oliver reached the top of a small hill overlooking the town. He turned around for one last look. Ashwood looked peaceful beneath the morning light. At the far end of the cobblestone street stood the old library. Its stone walls reflected the sunshine. Its windows were quiet. Its wooden doors remained closed. It looked like an ordinary building. Anyone passing by would never imagine the endless shelves, the warm fireplaces, or the gentle rooms hidden inside. Oliver smiled. Some of the most extraordinary places in the world never ask to be noticed. They simply wait for the right traveler. He opened his journal. Between its pages rested the little brass bookmark with the tiny moon engraved upon it. Beneath it, he wrote one final sentence: "The greatest journeys do not always lead us to new places. Sometimes they gently lead us back to ourselves." He closed the journal. A gentle wind turned the pages for a moment before becoming still again. Far above, a flock of birds crossed the bright morning sky. Oliver watched them disappear beyond the distant hills. Then he continued walking. The road ahead was long. There would be new towns, new faces, new adventures waiting beyond every sunrise. But he was no longer searching for peace. He was carrying it with him. Back inside the library, Mr. Edwin Hale quietly walked between the endless bookshelves. He returned each book to its proper place. He placed another log upon the fireplace. He straightened a chair beside the window. Everything was exactly as it should be. Finally, he stood beside the great wooden doors. A gentle smile appeared on his face. He whispered softly, "Safe travels, Oliver." The library became silent once more. Outside, the town lived another ordinary day. Children laughed in the streets. Shopkeepers opened their doors. The church bell rang softly across Ashwood. No one noticed the old library, and that was perfectly fine, because when night returned, when the stars filled the sky, and the town fell peacefully asleep, the great wooden doors would open once again. Perhaps another weary traveler would arrive. Perhaps another restless heart would discover the warmth of the library. Another story would begin. And somewhere between the shelves, another soul would remember that peace is not something we find at the end of a journey. It is something we quietly discover, one gentle moment at a time. As the evening stars slowly appeared above Ashwood, the old library waited patiently. Its shelves were full of stories. Its rooms were full of kindness. Its silence was full of comfort. And somewhere beyond the quiet night, every traveler searching for rest would one day find the path that led them home. The end.